Namaste and welcome back to Urban Chatterati. Today we are going to discuss what is happening between Saudi Arabia and America and why is the Biden administration is going after MBS. So Abhijit, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me as usual, Abhinav. Very well.
So Abhijit, what is happening? Suddenly the Mohammed bin is the bad guy and the entire Biden administration, entire liberal intelligentsia is basically going after him for a murder committed somewhere in Turkey. And the intelligence reports are now blaming MBS directly that he gave the order for the murder. It doesn't really, I mean, doesn't really look very clear cut proof, but then also the entire atmosphere has been built against MBS. What is happening out there?
Basically, this is payback for Trump. This is payback for making Kerry look stupid when he said, peace in the Middle East isn't possible unless you have a two-state solution and things like that. Make no mistake about it. Let's go through all the aspects of this, right? First, did MBS have Khashoggi killed? In all probability, yes, he did. However, you tell me which American administration has not killed journalists. They targeted, when they invaded Iraq, they targeted the Al Jazeera building. They have deliberately, and this is on record, they have deliberately targeted the Al Jazeera buildings in Egypt and in Afghanistan as well. They had to be talked out of it. There is a memo on record, an internal document on record, which is public, which talks about bombing Al Jazeera because they believe it to be an Al Qaeda affiliate. They're openly tom-tommed about bombing Serbian radio and TV during the Kosovo intervention, during the bombing of Serbia. What is this duplicate standards when it comes to killing journalists? हम करें तो चमत्कार, तुम करो तो बलात्कार. This is their general attitude towards killing journalists, right? Now, what is particularly curious with MBS is this was known, and this was known for years. I mean, that MBS was involved, we got to know within about, 2-3 days of this whole thing happening. We also need to understand Jamal Khashoggi was an Islamist. Make no mistake about it. He was a hardcore Islamist.
Muslim Brotherhood.
Muslim Brotherhood affiliated in one way or another, which is a clear enemy of the Saudi monarchy. The only monarchy that has been able to tame the Muslim Brotherhood has been the Jordanian monarchy, where the Muslim Brotherhood now becomes a loyal king's loyal opposition kind of thing, right? In Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, and all these other places, they've always been highly problematic. And in Saudi Arabia specifically, the problem of the Muslim Brotherhood was that it brings in sort of, Islamic Republican ideas, which are quite alien to the Wahhabi jurisprudence of Saudi Arabia, which is why when they got all these Sayyid Qutb's chelas in, they felt that they had been betrayed by these people because they're not in the Wahhabi interpretation of things truly Muslim either. That they are also engaged in shirk and bid'ah and, innovation and stuff like that, which they don't like. And now with Jamal Khashoggi, was his killing unjust? Of course, the killing of any journalist we should condemn, because it doesn't matter if they belong to a propaganda organization or a real organization, or if he's a Muslim Brotherhood or not, is definitely something to be condemned. The problem here is, A, who is America to do it? B, why is America doing it now? Because of a change of administration. And C, this is to suck up to all the political support that the Washington Post gave him. Or was it the New York Times? I forget what he wrote for.
No, but the point here is that this murder happened. Let's say the Jamal was a journalist, but many people say he was simply an undercover operative who was working for Saudi, then he crossed over to
Which doesn't matter. If you're a journalist, you are a journalist, full stop.
Yeah.
Right. You can even be an ISIS journalist. That doesn't matter. It still makes you a journalist. You have certain legal protections if and when you are a journalist. Full stop.
Okay. So let's say he was a journalist, and let's say the murder did happen on the order of the MBS, but it happened in Turkey. What has America to do with it? The point is that what is the wider calculation the America is doing, apart from, let's say you are saying that this is just a payback. Why are they going to strain the relation with their most, let's say, the most important ally in the
that is the whole problem. That is the whole problem with this, that this is one of those cases which makes absolutely no sense. Turkey is an ally gone rogue.
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia is not an ally that has gone rogue. You are basically one country punishing an ally for killing somebody in a third country. Now, you tell me, how does this actually work out? Right. So this will basically be brought in under the rubric of human rights, but we need to understand that this is not the case. This is being done for three reasons. One is to punish Mohammed bin Salman for effectively supporting Trump.
Hmm.
uh, it's a shot across the bow. Remember, he hasn't been placed on sanctions. He has just been क्या कहते हैं, he's been warned. All his chamchas and chelas have been sanctioned, even though those people have been found guilty and been sentenced in a Saudi court. Right. So this is number one. Number two, he's doing this because whoever, Washington Post or New York Times, is outraged and they want some kind of uh, uh, I guess a bone thrown to the dog, because literally they're dogs and they need bones thrown to them. So this is a throwing a bone to them and to the liberal lobby out there, the Vokes and things like that, whatever little bones they can get. The third is it's also a message to Iran saying, see, we're cracking down on all these things. We're genuine about the nuclear deal. Come back to the table and let's sit and talk. Right. So it's a classic case of personal pique, which then masquerades around as policy, which is the most dangerous kind of policy you can have, taking away from the best, from the biggest American foreign policy successes, which these people can't swallow because it happened under Trump.
Yeah, yeah. So coming to that point, so they're not only cracking down on MBS, but they're also putting on hold the weapons deal with the UAE and Saudi Arabia for the review, as they're saying, and they're basically saying these weapons deals for offensive. What does that even mean, Abhijit? Offensive weapon deals क्या होता है?
So this is just jargon, right? They use offensive and defensive. There is no linkage. uh, an offensive platform can be used for defense. A defensive platform can be used in offense. It's purely a tactical term. It's like saying a danda is a defensive weapon for your friends, but in the arms of your enemy, it's an offensive weapon. Hmm. So it's that classic मैं करूं तो चमत्कार तुम करो तो बलात्कार kind of logic. The basic thing is, it's punishment. It's punishment for getting too close to Trump. It is punishment for making that entire Washington foreign policy establishment look like a bunch of baboons. It's punishment. And that is what Trump did. Make no mistake. He made every think tank working on the Middle East. He made every expert working in the Middle East. He made every policy person working on the Middle East essentially appear like a baboon, scratching its bottoms in the savannas of Africa, not unfit to be in Washington, D.C., at best to become meal for a lion in the, I don't know, in the,
Savannah
what's,
grassland.
in the Kruger National Park. So this is a accumulation of peak. And that's what worries me, because we were always told America does institutional relationships. The individuals don't matter. Whereas I have always said individuals do matter because people make policy. The thing is, usually institutions act as a check and balance. Here, it is not. Here, the peak, the personal peak, is getting to extremely dangerous levels. I'm still waiting to see what they do to Israel, because Netanyahu has the biggest stick in store for him amongst all these people. I'm waiting to see what happens out there.
So what's the future of this Middle East peace process now? This reapproachment between the Arab world and the Israel.
The good thing is that that is now irreversible, right? They've already built so many linkages. If anything, they have learned that uh, uh, there is strength in uniting all their efforts. So like we said before, uh, uh, the Israeli ability to manipulate Washington, Saudi money, and the UAE sort of soft touch diplomacy, that is what they're combining in DC at the moment. uh, where this is going to really reflect is with Iran,
Hmm.
because they're showing that they can, minimize. Iran is also now worried because it's seen an accumulation of threat. It knew that these powers were coming together. Now it's become what was in fact what was a de facto alliance has now become a de jure alliance as well. And the Iranians are extremely worried. Now, the American calculation is that the more this alliance solidifies, the more reactionary and North Korea like Iran is going to become, which is complete rubbish. Iran is going to do what Iran does, irrespective of what the situation is. Right? Iran was supporting Hezbollah before. Iran continues to support Hezbollah now. There is no increase or decrease in any of that. The problem is, remember, in DC, you have these think tank circuits which fundamentally they don't tell you what you need to know anymore. They've become so highly politicized, they tell you what you want to hear. And the general belief is, mostly to satiate the Democrats' need for revenge against Netanyahu, Al Nahyan, and MBS, is to pass this off as conciliatory moves towards Iran, reducing Iran's threat perception, making it softer for the Iranians to concede, etc., etc., etc. Of course, complete bunkum.
But this is quite surprising because you see, uh, Al Nahyan and MBS. I mean, they are trying to chart a completely new path for the Arab world.
Yeah.
Dubai is anyways on the road to modernization and even secularism. So they are basically pushing back the religion. MBS is also envisioning a future about Saudi Arabia, which is not anchored in the religion, but in their national identity. He's even promoting the pre-Islamic sites and pre-Islamic history of Saudi Arabia now. And he's modernizing Saudi Arabia. Then why are these liberals who call themselves the champions of human rights and whatnot so anti both UAE and Saudi Arabia now?
The same reason that they've turned against Macron. See, we have to understand what we call liberals is actually an Islamo leftist alliance.
Hmm.
And like we discussed in your previous program, they use each other for what it's worth. The left detests Islam and Islam detests the left, but they are the most convenient alliance to form. And in this case, it's a classic thing where they want to show that a monarchy can never realistically be successful, even if it treads the path of human development. Soft changes, not, we're talking about incremental changes. Even what MBS is doing in Saudi Arabia isn't some rapid overnight change. It's not what Kamal Ataturk did to Turkey, which, by the way, isn't permanent, as opposed to what, as we've seen with Erdogan and people like that, as opposed to what Nahyan has done with the UAE, which is permanent in some parts. In some parts, like Sharjah, for example, they've regressed. Sharjah used to be the secular one where all the cricket matches used to be held and there used to be wine and whiskey and booze parties. Now they've gone back and imposed Sharia, whereas Dubai and Abu Dhabi are the ones that are going forward. Saudi Arabia is following that same path.
Yeah.
But obviously, this isn't, it doesn't gel well for leftists generally, because you want that religious identity politics as a vote getter. Right.
Hmm.
So it's also a threat to them in that sense. UAE was small enough to ignore, but UAE and Saudi Arabia going that way and subsuming identity politics to the point where they're willing to actually strike deals with Israel. Today, you look at it, technically, if you just go by what you're seeing in the papers, Israel has no better ally than the UAE.
Hmm.
You literally have Israelis flocking to the UAE and UAE walas going and flocking to Israel. And they're all going, putting up posters of each other. From what I'm hearing in Tel Aviv, if you dress up as a Emirati, and lots of Palestinians now, because they're treated like dirt, have started dressing up as Emiratis and putting on Emirati accents just to get VIP treatment at Israeli restaurants and Israeli shopping malls.
And same
Right?
is the story in the Dubai.
Dubai, people, my Israeli friends in Dubai, they're all wearing these lapel pins, with that Israeli flag and the UAE flag, jo lapel pins lagate hain. and they're getting called in for special discount. Oh, you're Israeli, we want to talk to you. Stop, we want to talk to you.
Imagine this was considered to be impossible, unimaginable. All the policy experts, everyone would say this is never going to happen. And it happened overnight.
Which tells you how quacky foreign policy actually is. No? Unfortunately, foreign policy and foreign policy experts are worse than Rahul Gandhi. Rahul Gandhi at least gets a reality check through elections. Foreign policy experts never get a reality check.
So anyway, so we have been seeing this kind of hit jobs against Al Nahyan in all these woke liberal media of the US, like New York Times. And we are also seeing them going completely against MBS. So who is the next in line, Netanyahu or Modi?
Netanyahu, Modi, not as much, I think. Modi will, there will be some blowback, not yet, but something will happen because the stakes, I think, with India are too high. Remember, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Israel are already in the American sphere of influence. With India, they know if they impose CATSA sanctions, that is the last arms deal they will ever sign with the Indian government. Right? Because it'll bring back all the bad memories of previous sanctions, and Boeing and Lockheed Martin and
Could
Co
you
can
just
just
elaborate upon it for the people?
yeah. So basically, if you remember, till what 1998, 99, every time we would get weapons from the Americans and the Americans didn't like something we did, they would sanction us for it. And for us, this went against our concept of strategic autonomy or national sovereignty, call it what you will. One of the reasons India started buying weapons is American weapons is that America said, look, that was a different reality. In this reality, you can pretty much do anything you want within limits. Just don't make a fool of us in public, and we won't be imposing any kind of sanctions on you. Now, for the last 20 years, at least since the last of the nuclear sanctions against us were lifted. Remember, America imposed nuclear sanctions after the Shakti tests under Vajpayee, and almost a year later, they lifted all of them. And in fact, they lifted even more sanctions that had been previously imposed. That's what set the path to normalization all over again. Today, with CATSA sanctions, that may not be the case. And they are stuck in a quandary because they're very clear the S-400 is a threat to American equipment because it, as far as they're concerned, it acts like as an electronic warfare system that picks up electronic emissions from every single non-Russian piece of equipment it comes in radio contact with. So they're very scared about it. There is apparently a need to impose CATSA sanctions, but in India, they realize whatever progress has been made over the last 20 years, it's just going to get wiped out completely.
But you see this campaign, just like we've seen the campaign against the MBS. And let me say that murder, I mean, that was a crime. But since when we started imposing sanctions against countries for a crime? Right, that's a big thing. So tomorrow someone dies in India, let's say in the case of farmers protest, that person was driving the tractor on 26th of January. Maybe if they wanted, they could have, they tried, and they could say, well, the government is killing these people and let's put sanctions against India.
Look, a targeted assassination, America carries out targeted assassinations. Israel
All the
carries
time,
out targeted
Obama was the
assassinations.
person who started it on a different.
Exactly right. So they do targeted assassinations all the time. Where you can place sanctions against people are A, acts of terrorism, and B, where large scale violations of human rights have happened, as in the case of Hong Kong. So, they sanctioned the chief executive of Hong Kong and things like that, which is completely valid. But mind you, they've never sanctioned the Saudis for human rights violations ever. And suddenly they go sanction them for getting rid of an opponent on foreign soil, right? Which is what America does all the time. So it's, on one hand, it's just completely disingenuous. And secondly, if you use these human rights argument, you're sitting and thinking, dude, like, is this the only human rights issue in Saudi Arabia that you found in the last 60, 70 years of your relationship?
Mhm. And this is also hypocritical because they are not sanctioning Pakistani army Imran Khan or ISI when they are carrying out assassination on the foreign soil. They've just assassinated the Baluch activist in Canada, next door to America, but they're completely silent on it.
Assassinating Baloch activists, outright rape of Balochistan that's happening. The Iranians, because the Baloch are Sunni, the Iranians are carrying out in the last 2-3 weeks the ethnic cleansing of the Baloch on the in the Iranian province of Balochistan, Sistan, which is Iranian Balochistan, has gone up phenomenally. If you go to Natsec Jeff's Twitter handle, he's been documenting all that Iran has been doing to the Baloch, summary executions and things like that. Have you seen a single whimper come out of the White House about what is happening either in Pakistani or in Iranian Balochistan? So understand, this is where America ends up looking like, sorry to use the word, but like a real overgrown child that's acting out of personal pique. It's not looking like a mature country. It's ending up looking like a pathetic little tin pot dictatorship.
Well,
And unfortunately, Biden's Alzheimer's or whatever it is doesn't help.
no, but I don't think that the Americans, especially the liberals, don't realize that their prestige has gone down in India and all across the world drastically. So after what happened at the Capitol Hill, after they manipulated the election, after what Trump did, and after what their
Abhinav, do you
media.
think they even know what the rest of the world is thinking? They live in an echo chamber. They only read things that their echo chamber promotes. They don't know what the other side is thinking.
I was shocked. So some clowns sitting in American media are now writing articles to determine whether they can call India democracy or not.
Yeah.
So imagine that sense of, and see, this wokeism in media and the universities of the America has delegitimized them in the eyes of the world, even their European allies.
Look, this is what we're seeing is the end of America as we know it. America has always been able to sort of self-correct. I think the scale of the problem now is so big, it will not be able to self-correct. I think Biden is just getting started, but once COVID ends, in order to stimulate the economy, he's going to engage in some kind of large-scale regime change somewhere or the other. Uh, he will not go down in the president as in history as a peace president at any rate.
He's bombing his way to Nobel Peace Prize anyway, so he started.
Correct. And he's going to get it at some point. He's desperate to get it. He will get it. So this is the end of America. It's a historic moment. I think if you're a student of anthropology or history, this is how empires come undone. It's like that famous Will Durant quote in Apocalypto, remember? A country doesn't destroy itself from without till it has destroyed itself from within.
Agreed. So this is the beginning of the end, a long decline of American power.
Exactly.
But do you think that is true? Because you have also made this point that we are going to see this century being the epitome of the Western power, of the American power, because of technological dominance. They have absolute technological dominance over the world. Their companies, their corporates are, beyond anything other countries can produce. So how do we square it off?
This is, to take you back to a bit of Middle Eastern history. This is how the Middle East looked sometime in 1640, 1650, when the Arab invasions of Persia began. Persia and the Byzantine Empire began. They were both at the absolute pinnacle of their power.
Right? 600, 6th century, 7th century.
7th century, 600, so 7th century. They were at the absolute pinnacle of their power. Khusro Anushirvan had gone and, Khusro Parvez, who was the Sassanid king, had gone and captured Jerusalem. He had, taken so much territory. And Heraclius, who then became the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, was acknowledged as the second Alexander or whatever, because he had regained so much of the territory. So both these empires were at their absolute pinnacle of their power. When the Arabs come and just, and that's it. Literally within 2-3 years, the Persian Empire is just finished. Right. And this is a repeat pattern you see in a Middle Eastern history. Assyria, Nineveh. Within 40 years of the absolute territorial expansion that the Assyrian Empire reaches, a coalition of states then comes and sacks Nineveh.
Yeah.
right?
Because there was
Not
also
within
very
40
barbaric.
years that would happen. This happens with India. Remember Ashoka, the empire starts collapsing within Ashoka's own lifetime. Ashoka starts off the collapse. He was not the greatest emperor. He was the clown. To call Ashoka the greatest of the Mauryan emperors is like calling Mikhail Gorbachev the greatest of Soviet presidents, right? Ashoka was the Mikhail Gorbachev of his time. 20 years after his death, Kharavela came from Odisha and sacked Patliputra. He burnt Patliputra down.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. People don't want to talk about it. Why? Because it affects the whole legend of Ashoka that we have. If you look at the Sassanid Empire at that point, just before it collapsed, there were all the telltale signs. Feudalism had increased. And you remember, we keep talking about tech feudalism today, where
mm,
these corporate big technology barons, they're effectively playing out the same role as the nobles of Europe did in the Dark Ages, the nobles of Iran did in the pre-Islamic period. They've completely weakened the state. They've weakened its response. The state responds to their interests rather than they responding to the state's interests. Social division is at an all-time high. It is now irreconcilable, right? In Anglo-Saxon countries, the divide is extremely deep. In all Anglo-Saxon countries, much more so than the non-English speaking world. So yes, that apogee of the absolute zenith of greatness is also when the seeds of its collapse are laid.
yeah.
Probably because of that.
True, and even in the case of America, you see their political factions can no longer talk to each other, and they are unleashing street mobs against each other, whether it's Black Lives Matters or it's the Trump rally at the Capitol, whatever. So this is the end of that intermediation process, end of the gentleman's agreement between the different political actors in America itself.
Look, I think the gentleman's agreement, because social media took off in America way before, whatever gentleman's agreement you had ended with Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, when there was that the cutoff of governmental money, which forced Washington into a shutdown and things like that. Uh, it's only gotten worse as social media has become more and more and more prevalent. It's just become bitter. The differences now are irreconcilable. You are going to see a civil war. It's not going to be a full on state civil war, but it is going to be a large scale urban militancy. That is now inevitable. You can't just have unilateral violence on one side, the way Antifa and BLM are carrying out, without having some kind of a societal response at some point of time. You can't have the complete demonization of a whole section of population like white heterosexual males are without not having a
Reaction.
repercussion. You can't have your most productive ethno-racial segment discriminated against for being productive, attributing their productivity to privilege, and put them out of a job for it,
Yeah, yeah,
and expect them not to respond. This is the same mistake that clown Paul Bremer made in Iraq. When he got made the Governor General of Iraq, what he did was his first act was to dismiss all members of the Baath Party. And what did the members of the Baath Party were the most highly educated? It was like, to get anywhere in Iraq, you had to be a member of the Baath Party, right? So you put your most highly educated scientists, doctors, whatever, out of a job and unemployable. They know society. So they took up arms. All the later Al Qaeda and all those commanders were all staunchly secular Baath people at one point of time.
even ISIS.
Even ISIS. Even ISIS.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
this is what you get.
It makes sense
Um,
because you're saying there's a tech feudalism in America now, and you also have these warring tribes determined by the social media, especially in the urban center. So it's just a breakdown of the state authority, and the tribes and the feudal lords are taking over, it seems.
yeah, that's exactly what you're seeing.
Mhm.
That is exactly what you are seeing. Remember, it was the events of the Magna Carta and things like that ultimately led up to things like the War of Roses and so on and so forth in England. Not directly, but it was one of the reasons as well. There were lots of proximate reasons for the War of Roses and things. You're seeing it all over again. History always repeats itself. We always think we have somehow gotten out of the clutches of history, that somehow technological innovation or mental innovation has gotten us out, and history always proves us wrong.
Yeah, but this problem of the Anglo-Saxon word will definitely come down to India because we're part, unfortunately, we're part of that Anglosphere. But coming back to Saudi Arabia, Abhijit, what are the changes happening within Saudi Arabia? Now, MBS is a dictator in the sense that it's a monarchy, it's not a democracy. But what are the changes happening at the social level, religious level within Saudi Arabia? Because the music and dancing is allowed in Saudi Arabia now.
Music and dancing is allowed. The bar on women wearing headscarves is gone. The social compact is I will dictate the pace of social change. I don't want you chaps mobilizing and protesting. In the UAE, for example, all of these things that have happened, right, including cohabitation. Today, you can cohabit you can live with your partner in Dubai or Abu Dhabi without having any kind of legal action taken against you. You can live outside of marriage, right? Uh, Nobody had to protest for this. It was given by the rulers when they deemed it necessary.
Mm.
Before, what was happening was that simply wasn't happening in Saudi Arabia at all. Now, what MBS is saying is, look, trust me, I will deliver slowly, 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 slowly. Just because you have progressive ideas doesn't mean I can take along the remaining 90% of the population with you. I have to think about that 90% of the population as well.
Mm.
I do have your best interest at heart, but don't push me over the edge.
Hmm.
In
Agreed.
which
That's
case,
a fair point.
which is a very fair point. Okay, it's one of the most logical things you can do.
Yeah.
But
That's just
isn't it
conservatism.
amazing
Like,
that
so that's
all
moving away
the
from orthodoxy towards conservatism.
exactly, and it's doing it in a smart way, not the stupid way that the Shah of Iran tried.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Agree.
You can't shove it down people's throats, and I would say that's actually a fairly democratic thing to do in an autocracy where you say let's take all the people together.
Hmm.
It's almost a socialist thing to do, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
The problem is, isn't it amazing that liberals have come down to the stage where everybody who is progressive and secular is now a bigot for them, and
Yeah.
everybody who's a rancid little fundamentalist turd is their hero and icon. Like literally, you have Ilhan Omar, short of lap dancing Erdogan. You look at that picture of her with Erdogan, you can clearly see she wanted to sit on his lap and give him a lap dance. I mean, short of that, look at her. I mean, it's you're sitting and thinking this is a
Forget it.
woman who talks about human
Look at
rights.
India. Look at India. Sharjil Imam, who's their poster boy. Uh, I mean, many people have told me from JNU, his hostel mates, that he used to actually come in the night and asking for bidi, not even cigarette, like bidi pita tha. And he would sit there and then talk for hours, argue for hours that why India should be under Sharia law, why non-Muslims having second-class citizenship is a just order, that's a stable order, and why that is the best thing to do. And he's a poster boy of all the liberals and seculars in India today.
Him,
Look at the Brigade Parade rally. In
Asaduddin Owaisi, everybody are their poster boys.
Owaisi
Okay.
is still a bit sophisticated. Look at this Furfura Sharif ka priest,
Yeah.
cleric.
Yeah. But look, this is where these people are. Unfortunately, in the Anglosphere, remember, these guys have just won an election big. Okay, Biden won the election. Uh, uh, Hook or crook, he won. In India, they are going on losing ground. Every election, they lose more and more and more and more. The BJP gains more and more and more and more. And what is amazing is their brainwashing seems to be completely shorn of any kind of connection to reality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In America, you can at least say that they are connected to reality. They're playing American identity politics in order to. The Democrats have for a very long time been on the back foot. The Republicans were the natural party. Today, because of Democrat identity politics, they have become the default party that is going to win. And it's always an uphill climb from now on for a Republican to win. Right? In India, that's not the case. In India, now the BJP has become the default, and they have to try extremely, the left has to try extremely hard to win. The problem is these gonchus don't seem to understand that what works for American folks does not work for Indian folks.
Yeah, yeah. Because in India, the revolutionary change is the Hindutva.
Exactly.
Now, coming back to the final point, Abhijit, what should be the India's policy or stand towards MBS and this Saudi American rivalry? Not rivalry, let's say this rupture in their relation.
Look, we need to understand, screw your notion of strategic autonomy. Okay, this Israel Saudi UAE alliance is one of the best guarantors of security in India. Okay, why? Because the Shias are mostly past identity politics at this point, because as you know, the Shias vote in large numbers for the BJP. They're one of the most economically well off, so they don't have time for much identity politics. Some of them do, yes, but mostly they do not. These guys today can ensure a certain level of stability amongst your Sunni population, which is the much more problematic section of your population. They're also in a position to give you a lot in terms of foreign policy benefits, etc., etc., etc. Where is the doubt left anymore that this is the best thing that has happened to you in foreign policy terms in the last 70 years? It's the best thing that's happened to you since you got independent, pretty much.
Yeah. You're
Right?
saying we should openly ally with the MBS and this alliance?
Indeed, not in word,
Yeah.
but indeed, yes. Look, Israel and the UAE haven't signed a pact.
Mm,
Yet everybody knows that if you attack one, the other is going to come attack you like there is no tomorrow.
mm.
Do the same thing. Alliances don't have to be on paper.
Yeah.
Alliances, there are far more effective alliances that are not on paper.
Yeah. Yeah. So, where do you see the future of India and Saudi Arabia relationship?
Up, up, and up as long as MBS lasts. MBS has to be protected no matter what the cost.
So, what can India do in there? Do we even
Right now,
have some
nothing
military
much.
capability?
Militarily, nothing much, because remember, the Saudi military itself is becoming more and more professional day by day. They
Hmm.
used to be something of a joke, but now they're becoming extremely professional.
Mhm.
They're following the same UAE model. So, what India can do is to use Saudi Arabia to grow itself, provide an investment opportunity for Saudi money, right? Keep supporting Saudi Arabia in whatever ways it can. Maybe do in terms of naval cooperation and piracy control of the Somali coast and things like that. Those are the small things you can do right now. Act as a conduit, maybe get into joint arms procurement, get into joint arms production, things like that. These are things you can do. There are small things you can do which all add up to a great big deal later on.
Hmm. Hmm. We hope that India and Arab relations will now blossom because, frankly speaking, Arabs and India relations have always been more or less good, right? Barring the, let's say, phase of the last 60 to 70 years, if you look at the historical timeline, they both are actually natural allies. So,
And people tend to forget that out of 1400 years of Islamic history, only 200 years, 200 to 250 years have been Arab history. The remaining has been 1050 to
Turkish.
1150 years have been Turkic history,
Hmm.
right? We don't get along with Turks, we get along just fine with Arabs,
And that's true on the at the ground level.
right? And
Pakistan
remember,
and Kashmir was an issue, but it seems that it no longer matters.
even there, remember, Syria, Iraq, UAE, we're almost always on our side on those things. Publicly they'll be like, देखो भाई ये रेजोल्यूशन तेरे को थोड़ा गाली दे के रेजोल्यूशन पास करना है, वो करने दे, पर कुछ होने नहीं देंगे तेरे को,
Hmm.
which is what they always used to do. Iraq, of course, used to go that one step further and say, no, we are not even going to allow the passing of the resolution. They would always vote against any OIC resolution as long as Saddam Hussein was alive.
And Saudi Arabia is doing it now. It's blocking all
And
the
now Saudi
resolutions.
Arabia has taken on that role, saying, ki, boss, nahi, we are not even going to allow the wording to be against it.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
Which is, of course, what Nahyan wanted. But Nahyan is a very smart man. Unlike Qatar, which tried to play too big for its boots, Nahyan has never made the mistake of thinking that he got one better off the Saudis. He's always said, Saudi Arabia will lead, we will follow.
Interesting. So interesting realignment of geopolitics in the region, and definitely new opportunities for India to advance its own interests. So thank you, Abhijit, for talking to us, and thank you, audience, for listening to us. Please subscribe to the channel and please join us the membership because I'm going to start doing once or twice a live session, but only for the members of the channel. So thank you.
வேல் வேல் வெற்றிவேல்.